in my 14 years in the North Dakota legislature, if during any of that time a man named Dave Thompson walked up to me, I knew I was going to get asked a tough question, but I knew it was going to be fair. I knew that. And if it was one I didn't want to answer, it didn't matter because with Dave, you answered it or else he's going to ask it again anyway. Dave is the news director at Prairie Public, and he joins us right now. Dave, good to have you coming down the road with us.
Thank you, Joel. Appreciate it.
The reason I called you is two-pronged. So let's get the one. Let's just say the uncomfortable one out of the way right away. I told people in the audience here down the road before you joined us that if there's any question whatsoever about your journalistic integrity or credentials, forget it. It didn't matter what party you're from, you're going to get asked that question I just described. And so when I used to see you hanging out with then State Senator Wayne Stenehjem and later on Attorney General Wayne Stenehjem, the one thing I knew was it was social by nature and not in any way involving the political job that he had to do or the journalistic job you had to do. So I want to compliment you on that because that's always a line you never crossed, Dave. You never did.
Thank you, Joel. That was one thing I made sure that everybody knew there was that line and everybody respected that line. And it was always good because you could set aside anything that might be controversial or might be, subject of interviews and basically sit down and have a nice human conversation one-on-one. And isn't that the beauty of North Dakota, that you can just still do that?
And I want to add this, that I would see you and Wayne and Lois Delmore and, there's numbers along with that. And we all, at the end of the day and end of a long day, you might go to the same place. And Lord knows that I went to that place more than you guys did. But one of those spots, I would see you guys at a table. And if I walked by, I knew you were playing trivia.
That's
I
correct,
knew you
yes.
were. I mean, you just all were very passionate about it.
Loved it. And Wayne was really good at trivia. I mean, you couldn't beat him. If he was on another team, there was no way you could beat him. He was just that good.
Yeah. So, his death, obviously a big surprise to all of us. Had he been ill? Did you even know that he was struggling with anything, Dave?
No, not a thing. Remember when he announced his retirement, he was really looking forward to doing some traveling and, doing some other leisure activities. The next day, I saw him at one of the local Walmarts, and we had a chance to talk for about 10 minutes. He said, the best decision I've made, I've given a lot to public service, but now it's time to just kind of sit back, enjoy life, do some traveling with Beth, and he was really looking forward to it. I had no clue there was any issue with his health at all.
See, Wayne and I served in the Senate together, and obviously I served more years with Bob, his brother Bob, who we lost to a tragic heart attack as well in Alaska. And so when I heard this happen to Wayne, while it was shocking, it didn't surprise me. Does that make any sense, Dave?
Oh, yes, I completely understand.
So you take a look at a man that's about to retire after all those years of service. And I'm not trying to pretend on the show today that Wayne and I always got along. I saw it as my job as a talk show host to challenge him on certain things and point out that, the conversation's one to get going and to get people talking. And I think Wayne understood that. I do think that Wayne, put himself in a position where, as an attorney general, he couldn't always have that conversation. That didn't stop us from trying to have that conversation. But,
right.
I think that Wayne really took that office to a place where he felt comfortable with it. And I'm curious what your take on that is.
I completely agree with you. And one thing I'd like to mention is he was really a stickler for open meetings and open records laws. I mean, he did work in the legislature about, tightening those laws up to make sure there weren't any local governments who were kind of winking at the laws. He made sure that those laws were followed, and we really do appreciate that. he wasn't the only one, but he was one of the leaders in making sure that we have a good open meetings, open records law.
I remember him being a champion of that in the North Dakota Senate. I'm going to add one other thing, Dave, and I'm sure he told you this as well. When I was young, I was 33 years old when I first got into the Senate, and the Democrats had just lost control, and I think we were one seat away from being in the majority, if I remember right, but we were close. And there were enough, shall we say, progressives on the other side of the aisle that voted our way most of the time anyway, so we were in pretty good shape. But I was a 33-year-old being told by individuals to go over and work this and get up on the floor and say this. And Wayne was the one that came up to me and said, Joel, just keep this in mind. Any big issue, you can stand on the floor, you can grandiose, you can make this speech or that speech, but any big issue is decided before you ever get to the floor. And he was right about that, and it was some of the best advice I ever got, Dave.
That's very true. I mean, he'd been around the process, but when he got passionate on something, and I have to, there's a little anecdote about that. He really got passionate, and one of them was having the Martin Luther King holiday declared in North Dakota. He joined with a lot of Democrats to push that over the finish line, and I think that was one of his prime accomplishments. He used to talk about that once in a while.
You know, my sister was Attorney General before him, and I saw Heidi's statement when it came out after Wayne had passed away, and Heidi's statement was perfectly clear on her respect for Wayne, but it went back to their time at the University of North Dakota and the friendships that you can make there. And I always wonder if that isn't North Dakota as a whole. You mentioned earlier that you can ask questions in a civil way and get a civil answer and yet still ask the question that needs to be asked. And, you know, the relationships you have and the friendships you make in that college setting, you know, those seem to be a connection that Wayne used for a long time.
Oh, yes, absolutely, he did. And I think you may remember this, Joel. When they first got to the legislature, there was a whole pile of young legislators who came in at about approximately the same time, and they were dubbed the Kitty Caucus. And I think they embraced the nickname, but they actually got an awful lot accomplished because of the relationships they had. And it was not just Republicans, it was Democrats too. And they got a lot accomplished for people who had just been new to the legislature. Yeah.
And they stuck with each other for a long, long time.
Right.
They did. The Ray Holmbergs and the Wayne Stenehjems were part of...
And the Steve Swantex and people like that. And even Lois Delmore, you know.
Yep. Yeah. And Lois, you know, I did speak to Lois, albeit by text. And even in writing, you can see the kind of pain that some people are in. Mm-hmm. You really can. And that Stenehjem family, that Stenehjem name has been synonymous with North Dakota politics for a long time, Dave.
It has been, yes.
So,
and of course, they're the banking family too.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. Exactly. So, when it comes down to it now, you know, Wayne was going into retirement anyway. You know, and so people were positioning themselves. Drew Wrigley had already kind of positioned himself to be the Republican candidate for Attorney General. You know, the governor appoints. Now, the governor appoints so that we do have an Attorney General. You have your boots on the ground in that capital as well as anybody I know. Anything you're hearing, anything that you're seeing, is there a deadline when the governor announces?
I think that you're going to see this filled fairly quickly. You know, I'm hearing a number of people who might be considered for that job. But the one thing about Governor Burgum and his administration, they're very tight. They don't leak very much. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Well, when you hire a reporter for the Fargo Forum as your press secretary, you end up with some of that. And it's unfortunate because I wish they would leak a little bit
more. So do I.
Yeah, exactly. Dave, all those friends that you're going to see, you know, wish them well for me. And I don't know if you've seen his brother Al. Dave and I know, ladies and gentlemen, that Al was a state representative out of Wahpeton for a little while. So he was down in my neck of the woods, and Al and I have been able to retain our friendships through some tough political times. But
Oh, yes.
how's Al doing, Dave?
Al seems to be doing okay, but he lost Bob, what is it, about a decade ago, and then he lost Wayne now. So
yeah,
it's kind of tough. He's the last of that kind of generation of Stenehjems.
Yeah. Well, David, thank you. This isn't an easy conversation for you to have, and yet you're willing to do it. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, Joel. Appreciate the time.